Hello, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to today's sessions for Connecting Online. This is the first one, the first day of Connecting Online. We've got 3 days, today, tomorrow, and Sunday. And it's really a pleasure every year. This is our 5th year to be moderating these sessions. It's exciting to meet the participants because it's you and the presenters. It's everyone who joins that makes Connecting Online so much Connecting Online and so wonderful. These are the participants. My name is Nellie Deutsch. You can see me right here, okay, with my short hair. And our next presenter is Benjamin Stewart. He's right here. The presenters are from around the world. We've got the United States, we've got Mexico, we've got Benjamin's from Mexico, we've got Africa, we've got Europe, countries in North America, Canada, and the United States, South America, Brazil, Argentina, Romania, the UK, Ireland, Greece, Australia. So it's really an international conference, and I think that you can only make this free online because everyone is volunteering. The presenters, I volunteer, and the participants, we're all volunteers. And we're doing this for learning. So keep that in mind. All right, so a little bit about WizIQ. Okay, I've shared this with you, and I'd like to stress that you're all invited to join the learning area where you can get everything, all the very important content, the presentations, everything. If you click on that, and you can also copy the chat so you can have it for later, you'll get all the information on how to get the most out of WizIQ. Okay, there are different possibilities, and you can make the most. One of the things, of course, is using a headset and checking your device settings. So I couldn't stress that more. In addition, learning and connecting online requires us to be, fair to our computers, and we need to actually take care of our computers. And what better way than to clean it and make sure that we only have one browser window open and not too much, so that we don't overload our computers the way we can overload our minds. All right, so a little bit about the conference. The conference started in 2009. This is our 5th year, and it's really exciting. You can join as a presenter and come as an to also watch next year. It's open for 2014. It's on the first weekend of February. Next year it's going to be actually on the 8th, I believe, 7th of February, which is a couple days later, but generally it's the first few days of February. And now to Benjamin. Benjamin and I have known each other for years. And when I say years, Benjamin, I mean internet years. Okay, I don't know when we first met, but it seems like a really long time, because in internet years, and remember the internet is still a baby, that's like maybe 100 years ago, 10 years, 5 years is 100 years. I don't know. We'll have to figure that out one day. All right, so Benjamin is currently doing his PhD, and I'm really excited about that because I want all my friends, my online colleagues and friends, to do their PhDs because it's such an experience. And I hope, Benjamin, that you're enjoying it. In education, curriculum and instruction, which is exactly what I did my doctorate in, and he's doing it at Grand Canyon University, which I know is a great university because one of my committee members moved there, and we've become very close friends. He's doing it at North Central University because Grand Canyon doesn't have a doctorate program. Right now it only has an MA. North Central does. He's a full-time EFL teacher. He teaches English, and he's got quite a history that maybe he'll tell you about. He didn't start off as an English teacher, but he's amazing, absolutely amazing, and it's a pleasure. Benjamin, it's always a pleasure to connect with you, whether in a virtual classroom such as this, which is live, or whether asynchronously through Moodle or through other channels. I haven't met Benjamin. I hope we will meet very, very soon. I'm looking forward to that because generally I meet my old friends, old in the sense of internet, old. So Benjamin, let me just, if you can raise your hand, I'll be able to move the speaking tools and writing tools to you. Benjamin, oh, there we go. Thank you. All right, so here's Benjamin, and I want to give you, hi, Benjamin. Good morning.
Hello, Nelly. Good morning.
It's exciting. Yes, go ahead. I'm
Oh,
going to be stepping on the side. You can move everything. Thank you for coming.
great. Thank you very much, Nelly, for that introduction. I appreciate it. I'm very happy to be presenting for the first time here in this conference and looking forward to interacting with you all during the next 45 minutes or so. Before we get started, I would like to know just to kind of get an idea of some of the participants here and some of your background. If you wouldn't mind, if you are teaching, what do you teach? If you're a language teacher, um, if you wouldn't mind providing some context, just to get again an idea of your background. If you haven't already, please feel free to let us know where you're from. It's always good to know where you're calling from and get to know a little bit about you. What I intended to do today is to go through a presentation, a research that I'm currently involved with. I'm still at the planning stages. I have not implemented the study yet, but this today gives me an opportunity to kind of present what I have so far as, with regard to the theory that I'm planning as well as the methodology. It allows me to kind of think out loud and throw out ideas and hopefully get some feedback from you all through this chat and or through the recording. As I understand, these are all being recorded. So if in any event you need to leave early, feel free to check out the recording and feel free to contact me either via WizIQ or through some of the links that I provided in this slide later if you would like to know more about my presentation or my research. Okay, great. So I'll go ahead and get started. The main premise of my research, I teach at the Universidad Autónoma de Aguascalientes, which is a public university here in Aguascalientes, Mexico. And I teach pre-service English language teachers. We have a BA program in English language training. So I teach various courses in the program and helping pre-service teachers become professional teachers. So one of my main focuses or interests is professional development for language teachers. And as we get started here, I'd like to just throw out this reflective question, and feel free to comment in the chat box. But when you reflect back on your own personal experience with regard to professional development, how have those experiences been? Have you had good experiences? Has it been challenging? Has it been successful in terms of how the professional development ultimately affected the language learner's experience or is their achievement? So one of the things that I'm looking at is trying to find a way to create opportunities for language educators to take advantage of their own professional learning. So this overall general question kind of sets up the direction that I would like to take my research and our discussion today. So in Mexico, I generated this. Basically, one of the issues we have here in Mexico is that we have few teachers, less than 40%, who actually receive the professional development support that they need. There was a report from the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, which is an international summit on the teaching profession. And this came out in 2011, and they addressed four different issues with regard to teacher development. One is how teachers are recruited and trained initially, so how are they developed and what training do they receive before they enter into the profession. how teachers develop in service. So once they're actual practitioners, what type of support do they receive? How teachers are actually evaluated, and how teachers actually engage in reform, and how do they lead. So this particular report, and you can find the link here at the end of the presentation here if you want to get more information on this report, but it ranked 14 different countries around the world. There are 14 member countries that made up this report, and Mexico is one of them. And it found that there was a global average over the 14 countries that 70% of these countries did receive some form of professional development. So in terms of these other countries, Mexico tends to lag behind when it comes to the professional development support that they need. So this is one of the problems that I think we currently face that I wanted to investigate and direct my research towards. We also have 65%, 60 to 65% of Mexican teachers have no induction or mentoring program. So when they enter into the profession, they oftentimes don't get the support that they need. And since I'm in the, my interests are helping pre-service educators get into the field, this is quite alarming. I think this is a problem that really needs to be addressed as well, so that the teachers, when they first get into the profession, have the support that they need. There's a global average of 18 to 20%. So again, Mexico tends to lag behind other countries, according to this report, with regard to induction or mentoring programs. So the basic premise here, and what I'd like to talk about today, is basically being that informal pedagogical dialogues will become the means by which language educators share how they interact with ideas, materials, and other educational stakeholders in terms of cultivating one's personal learning network. So today what I'm going to do in more detail is try to unpack or describe what I mean by informal pedagogical dialogues, what do I mean by personal learning networks within the context of my research. And feel free to field questions or ask questions in the chat box, and I will try to field questions towards the end of my presentation. So I'll try to get through here and allow time at the end here for those questions. So informal pedagogical dialogues, I think the simplest way to think of this is in the traditional face-to-face classroom, and when you are typically working at a school, for example, you oftentimes have maybe a teacher's lounge where you tend to hang out informally with your colleagues. You have opportunities to discuss what's going on in your classrooms. And the basis for my research is try to create that same environment online, where educators, language educators in particular, are have the confidence to freely share their opinions, ideas, and experiences with regard to language teaching and learning. And one of the premises is that you can basically complement conferences such as this, workshops, and in-services with these informal pedagogical dialogues by allowing educators to really link theory and practice, to be able to link what they're doing in the classroom with the theory that's related there. So here the tendency is not to rely so much on isolated workshops. One of the comments, in fact, there was a gentleman, I believe, who posted a comment in WizIQ for this particular live session, where he was basically mentioning that the education and learning of educators needs to be relevant and needs to be meaningful for them, and it basically arguing against simply relying only on isolated workshops, for example, and I couldn't agree more. And the idea is not to, I'm not advocating that workshops aren't useful, that obviously conferences like this are not useful, because they are very much so. But we can also complement this with more ongoing informal pedagogical dialogues where, again, educators have the space, the opportunity to share ideas across different online spaces, and they can share whenever they would like to. So the basic premise for my research is to create those informal pedagogical dialogues online. And since my research is being based online, at this point, I'm interested in only creating those experiences online, not so much face-to-face, although they certainly do occur. So when we look at cultivating a personal learning network, and I'll go into a little bit more detail what I mean by personal learning network, the key word here is cultivating. And we can look at the metaphor of growing a flower or a flower garden with regard to learning and trying to create the environment, the proper soil, the proper weather conditions that promote the flower to grow. We would do the same looking at it from a learning standpoint, creating this environment, a learning environment where teachers, educators, language educators are able to interact and create a dialogue in a safe environment where they're not being critiqued, but that they are basically being supported, and that eventually educators have a constant support system online when they need it. And so I think I chose the word cultivating in the sense that it's ongoing and it's complex, and there's not perhaps one way of doing it, but that the best you can do is to create the environment for learning to grow, to develop over time, and that at some point the responsibility does lie on the educator, but that from a planning standpoint, the idea is to create that environment. Yes, for an environment where everyone can succeed, right? So that's very important as well. So when we look at personal learning networks, in general, I look at it as the sum of all social capital and connections that result in the development and the facilitation of a personal learning network. Now, I agree with this definition, and we can look at social capital as being kind of a collective of social networks that really integrate with each other, that perhaps has a purpose, a common purpose, in this case, your own personal learning. And so basically it's looking at the social capital and the connections that we make and reflecting from a meta standpoint, if you will, how we learn. It's looking at the connections, the people that we connect with, and finding those who best help us learn what we need to learn at any given moment. And that may change over time. That may develop over time. That may dwindle over time, depending on the circumstances and the individuals. But it's basically looking at these types of networks and how these social networks can work together and grow and help one's own learning. Just out of curiosity, I'd like to pose a question here, if I could, and ask which technologies, and there are a few here in this image here, hopefully you can see this, which of these technologies do you tend to use the most? We have here on the list Twitter, Google, Google+, Facebook. I'm not sure if Facebook's on here, should be. Skype is here, Wikispaces. Which of these technologies or other technologies that perhaps are not on this image do you tend to use regularly? Okay, Facebook, Skype, okay, YouTube, good, Google, wonderful, great. So a lot of us are using a lot of these technologies already, and so someone mentioned ePortfolio, good. Okay, so when we look at a social network, we can look at it in terms of there being a connection and contagion. When we look at connection, it simply means that we have some sort of connection either online, we have a connection via some shared interest or purpose, And I think that the social network, we have connections that are, they can be bidirectional, so it can be a dialogue between, for example, two individuals, obviously, or it could be more of a broadcast or one-directional approach where maybe we follow other educators. We don't really interact with them, but that we receive information from them either through videos, or dialogues, or texts, or forums. So we can look at a connection as being bidirectional or unidirectional. We can look at the term contagion in the sense that what flows actually through those ties that we have, through those connections, what type of information flows through that. And so we can look at, some information, some content is more important than others, but it is important to look at not just the connection, and it's not just about seeing how many connections you have, but also, more importantly, what information flows through those connections that best serves a purpose, that serves your interests and needs at any particular time. So when we look at social networks, it's looking at both the connection and contagion. And for those of you who uploaded or shared some of the technologies that you're using, of those, which do you feel offer the best connections and the actual ties and contagion aspects of your network the best? So for example, in my case, I use Google Plus quite a bit, and I share a lot of information and interact quite a bit more in Google Plus than Facebook. And for me, for my own personal learning, I use that helps me get information and share and learn from other people, perhaps more so than in Facebook, which I do interact with, but not to the degree that I do in Google+. So of those technologies that those of you who have shared, which technologies do you feel add the most to your social network? Again, in the sense of a connection and the actual information that flows through those ties and how you interact with others. Okay, so we have some Facebook, Google Plus people, Nings, great, wonderful. And you'll notice that it's going to be different for everyone. And I'll talk a little bit more when I get into the methodology of my research, that it really is about each person adapting and determining which technologies, which online spaces works best for them. It's not so much about creating one particular social network for teachers. It's more helping educators, language educators, find their way and find those technologies and those social networks that best work for them. Great. Okay, so, excuse me. So when we look at social networks and we look at these two ideas of connection and contagion, we can look, there are a few principles, and I'm going to share 3 principles here with you, and as they pertain to social networks. And the first is that we shape our networks. We've heard the term birds of a feather flock together. And the idea is that when we shape our networks, there is a tendency to associate with people with similar interests and histories, dreams, okay, and we tend to gravitate towards those who we have a shared interest. Now, that's not to say that we don't also, some like diversity of ideas and maybe a difference of opinions, but in general, the idea is that there is a tendency for us to gravitate towards those who have a similar interest. But we also have a control over how we structure our networks. That is to say, we can choose how many people we connect with, for example. If we have some individuals that over time we find that we have less in common, or that there's not a real reason to maintain a connection with, well, we're likely to drop that connection. And so we shape our networks in the sense that we can choose with whom we interact. And we can also influence how dense the connections are with our friends and colleagues. So for example, if we have colleagues in different online spaces that might not know each other, it's quite easy, and we have this power basically to create opportunities for those friends to meet up. And so you might just have the simplest example would be to create a meeting where you invite friends that perhaps don't know each other but maybe have something in common or maybe have some common purpose. And you have that power. You have the way to shape your network to invite in colleagues and friends into your own social network or professional learning network, and they can interact with amongst themselves. And the last way that we can control or shape our own networks is that we can control how central we are to our own network. So for example, in a MOOC class, in a massive open online course, where we have basically the choice whether or not we want to lurk in the background or if we want to be active and participative within the network. And so that's another choice that we have, and that's another way that we can shape our own network. Now, another principle that we can look at when we look at basically forming our own social networks is this idea that the network also shapes us. So we not only are shaping our network, but the network also shapes us. So there was a Norway study that showed that, and this might be stating the obvious, but a person with no friends is quite different than someone who has a lot of friends. And I think we can intuitively understand this. But they did a study also on firstborns. And firstborns actually scored a few points higher on intelligence tests than a secondborn. And a secondborn scored a few points higher than a thirdborn. And so this kind of shows, too, they proved through this one study that the social network, in this case on the family size and the structure of the family, influenced the individual, influence in this case intelligent tests. But I think we can see how the network also shapes us. And we can see this, I think, in our own classrooms as well through some of the ways in which the environment of the classroom may affect positively or negatively the student's experience. And we can, I think, transfer this idea to teacher professional development and looking at how the environment really affects the teacher. If there's a learning environment where it's safe and teachers are allowed to take risks without fear of having a negative teacher evaluation, for example, I think they're more likely to participate and be more active in the learning process and share with other colleagues. Okay, so the third principle that I'd like to share here is the network itself has a life of its own. It shares different emergent properties, and one of the easiest examples would be the wave. Now, if you've ever been at a sporting event, I'm sure you have witnessed the wave where the fans will sit and they will stand up and create a wave that will go all the way across the stadium. I think this became well known in Mexico, actually. The World Cup in Mexico in 1986, they refer to it as La Ola, or the wave, and they basically did an analysis of this phenomenon. They determined that, on average, the speed of the wave would cover about 20 seats per second. So they actually did an analysis to see how fast the wave would progress around the stadium. And the basic point being that you can look at the network and consider different properties of that network in and of itself without taking any consideration of the individuals within that network. So in this case, when they did that analysis, they weren't interested in how each individual person raised up from their seat and sat back down. They looked at it holistically and looked at the entire wave and what properties that wave had in and of itself. Again, we can look at examples like flock of birds, schools of fish, swarms of insects, and we see this pattern, this emergent group network type of pattern where we look at just the network and analyze different properties and not taking into consideration the actual individual, in this case, people or animals that make up the network. Okay, so now I'd like to kind of switch to my definition, how I am looking at a personal learning network with regard again to my research. And I'm going to break down the personal learning network into 3 areas, and I'll talk about each one in turn very briefly. The first being from an ideational or idea standpoint. So basically looking at a personal learning network, or one aspect of a personal learning network, are those opinions that teachers share, the beliefs that they have, understandings, the thoughts, the knowledge and perspectives that they share when they interact with others. And when we look at understandings, we can look at it from having 6 different elements. Okay, and this is coming from Wiggins and McTighe's Understanding by Design, and this is an alternative to Bloom's taxonomy when they put forth this idea, this notion that an understanding has 6 facets. And so the first facet that they have here is explain. Now the idea with these facets are that any performance verb falls under all of these 6 categories. And the idea is the degree in which we understand something is the degree to which we are able to explain, interpret, apply, have perspective, have empathy, and have self-knowledge. So when we explain, we can also use other performance verbs like model, synthesize, teach, design, exhibit. These are all performance verbs that they classify as falling under this one facet of explain. So in my research, when I look at how educators are sharing ideas, one aspect is to see to what degree they understand a certain topic by, for example, explaining, or looking at the other performance verbs that fall under this particular idea. Interpret, along the same lines, we could see how maybe educators use metaphors, how they tell a story, maybe how they evaluate a certain aspect of their own classroom, or they evaluate a certain theoretical concept, maybe how they critique a concept. All of these performance verbs fall under the facet of interpret. And when we look at apply, we can see how teachers discuss ideas pertaining to performance, how they solve a problem, maybe how they test certain theoretical concepts in their own classroom, how they adapt to certain situations in their classroom. So any of these types of ideas that they share or beliefs would fall under the apply facet. When we look at perspective, some other performance verbs might be compare and contrast. So as teachers compare and contrast different theoretical views, they're showing perspective. When they criticize a certain teaching method, for example, they're showing perspective. When they draw on inferences, they are also showing perspective. So again, these are some of the types of ideas that I'll be looking for when I start collecting data for my research, and finding out in what degrees they understand certain items by looking at each of these facets. Empathy, we're interested in teachers and how they can relate to other contexts, how they can imagine being in a different situation and relating to other individuals perhaps in other situations, perhaps role play, where they take on a different idea and show some form of empathy for someone else. And finally, self-knowledge, where they self-reflect, they self-assess their own teaching. This is a quite important one that I'll talk a little bit more here in a few more minutes. But basically, having a metacognitive look at their own learning and how they look at their own network, both from their own standpoint and perhaps from their colleagues' standpoint. But we'll talk about that a little bit more in a few minutes. Now, we can also look at a personal learning network from a materialistic standpoint or from a technology or technical standpoint. And I think we can see quite clearly, especially in online spaces, the different technologies that are going to be required or used in order to interact, in order to share these ideas that we have, which technologies, whether it's a Moodle, a Ning, whether it's through platforms such as WizIQ, what platforms or technologies are they going to be using? In my own particular research, I'm focusing on primarily technologies and how they interact, since I'm not focusing on face-to-face types of interactions. I'm looking at primarily technologies when it comes to materials. So I might ask here, I'd like to take time to ask a question here to those who are in the chat room. What materials are needed to communicate with others? Which materials do you use primarily to chat or to communicate on a regular basis? Which, if you had to choose one technology that helped you communicate with others on a regular basis, which would it be? Google Drive, okay? So maybe sharing documents in Google Drive and having a conversation through a document. There's a comment section in Google Drive. Facebook, okay? So in Facebook, you could correspond again with colleagues. And the question here is more related to how you communicate with other colleagues, not so much students, just to make that clarification. So from your own personal learning standpoint, which technology do you feel best supports ways for you to communicate with others? Okay, so we have Facebook, Skype. For me personally, Twitter would be the most, I think, the most common material or technology that I use to communicate with others. But again, it's going to depend on the individual. It's going to depend on the context. It might even depend on what type of idea that you want to share. Great. Thank you all for sharing. Appreciate that. So again, just a few tools here. WordPress. So if you're an active blogger, maybe you might tend to gravitate towards WordPress or Blogger to share ideas, to communicate with others, whether you create your own personal blog or whether you interact with others by responding and adding comments to other blogs. YouTube, Twitter, as we mentioned, Flickr, Facebook. Okay, and there's many others, of course, many others. So Holly says she's learned the most through Twitter, and I certainly agree. Twitter is a great way just to post a question and to get responses back. It's a great tool for that. Okay, so the third aspect of the personal learning network that I'd like to share with you today is obviously the social interaction. So we have ideas that make up a personal learning network. We have the different technologies or materials that are needed, but we also need to interact with people. So this is the third aspect of a personal learning network that I'd like to share with you today, and ask you to reflect on with whom you interact. Now, you don't have to give names, but when we look at our own personal learning network, we ask ourselves, or maybe we could ask ourselves, well, why do I interact with this person? What does this person, how does this person help me become a better learner and better educator, a better practitioner? And a lot of the research that, in fact, the data that I want to try to collect is pertaining a lot to this metacognitive approach to one's own learning, asking, well, how do you do it? And asking, well, why are you interacting with these types of people? When we look at how we interact with others, it can take various forms. Obviously, we can have a one-to-one interaction, a dialogue, through an interview, for example, or just informal conversation, but it can be between just two individuals. We can also look at interaction through one-to-many. So, for example, now in this particular context, a lot of different things, different ways of interaction are taking place. For example, one is you could argue that I'm speaking and you're listening, so it could be a one-to-many approach. A lot of you are interacting in the chat through the back channel, and you could be having a one-to-one conversation if you are calling out each other's names and responding to each other. You could be having a one-to-one. There's a many-to-one in the sense that I'm looking at a lot of information here, and you are all providing information back to me, right? And we could also look at clustering. So perhaps later on, for example, if some of you in the chat room meet up later or find yourself in a different online space, that you might find a cluster we might find clusters of individuals who carry on a dialogue outside this one presentation here. So the way in which we interact can vary. It can vary from the perspective, from the individual. It can be from the same context, just as the example that I've given here. There could be a variety of different ways in which we interact in one given instance. We can also look, as I mentioned before, interaction as being unidirectional or bidirectional. So hopefully at the end we'll have more of a bidirectional conversation where you are asking questions and I'm answering questions. And so also we can look at, with regard to how we interact, do you tend to interact with colleagues that you work with face-to-face? Or do you tend to interact with more educators outside of your institution? Do you tend to interact with like-minded individuals who share your similar interests, purposes? Or do you prefer to interact with those who have more diverse opinions? Maybe someone who doesn't necessarily share your same viewpoint or perspective, but that nonetheless feel adds to your own personal learning. So again, when we look at the way in which we interact or how we interact, these are some of the ways in which I'll be looking and interested in seeing how other educators interact with regard to, again, how they choose to interact with colleagues from their own institution or outside their institution, etc. Right. And Jay Jones mentions breakout groups. So that would be a great example of a cluster within, in this case, the WizIQ, I think now has a function, and Nell, you can probably correct me later if I'm wrong, if they have a way to do a breakout room. But I know a lot of platforms offer that, that option. Okay, so I'm going to move right along here. I'll finish my personal learning network here by adding that the idea is that it be seen as a material semiotic, and that basically means that it's a relationship between concepts and physical things, being whether it's technology or in its people. We can look at networks as being both physical and non-physical actors or nodes of a network. And so the personal learning network, for the purposes of my research, is basically linking ideas, materials, and social interaction with the ideas that we can't understand any one of those three without understanding the other two. So it's really this relationship between these three concepts. And so for us to understand those, we have to understand how the three interact amongst themselves. Okay, so the purpose of my research, this is basically the research question that I'm after. How do EFL educators in Mexico conduct open online informal pedagogical dialogues that enrich a personal learning network? And it's a multiple case study, and which will be primarily qualitative in design, and one which allows participants to share interpretations through inductive, emergent, and a holistic approach. I'll be choosing 10, at least 10. It's going to depend on how many are participating, but I need to have at least 7 educators from 3 different local institutions. So these will be English as foreign language educators who are teaching here locally in Aguascalientes, Mexico. And I'll need to find 3 different institutions that are willing to participate, and again, that have at least 7 to 10 educators from each institution. The way in which I'm going to collect the data is as follows. There'll be an online survey which will give me an idea as to those who are likely to complete the study. So it'll have questions related to their use of technology, how they feel about sharing information online. From there, I'll have a face-to-face orientation with each institution. So I'll have some face-to-face time with them for them to know more about the study, for them to learn more about what they're getting themselves into, and for me also to learn more about them. The idea with the online survey and the face-to-face orientation is for me to find those individuals who are likely to complete the study. Once I've selected the participants, there'll be a 10-week interaction period where they'll interact online, and I'll talk about that briefly here in a few minutes. There will be 5 bi-weekly hangouts, so there will be a synchronous component to my data collection, a live conversation where I'll be able to have kind of a focus group online where I'll collect additional information, and it will conclude with a one-on-one interview, very brief, just to get some final thoughts and reflections from each individual basically privately. So all of these, the 10-week interactional period and the hangouts will be public. So all the information that is shared will be public. The rest, the online survey, face-to-face orientation, and the one-on-one interview will be held private. Okay, the experience here, the PLN, Personal Learning Experience, is what I'm calling the website, and I have the link here included at the bottom. This is where the participants can, basically it's the home page where all the information about the research can be found. So they can go in here, it's kind of a starting point for them to get more information about the research, and it's also for any language educator who wants to participate can also participate in the dialogues that are going on. One of the main characteristics of my research here is that the participants of the study that I'm using to collect data will interact not only amongst themselves, but obviously they'll be able to interact with whomever they want to. Since all of this information here in this web page is open, any language educator can participate in the conversations that are being conducted. So just a quick invitation to everyone who's here in the chat room and for those who are watching the recording. You are encouraged and invited to participate however you'd like in this online space. Okay, I'm going to jump ahead here because I know we're getting close to the end. I'm also complementing the Moodle site, which was the prior website that I just showed you was an actual Moodle site, with a Google Plus community. And this is again just a way for some of the teachers to get started. If the participants that I use or that I select for my research are already interacting in their own online communities, they're going to be encouraged to continue to do so. But I am trying to create just basically this Google Plus community and the Moodle so that for those educators who maybe want to participate or are willing to share openly online but maybe aren't used to sharing in certain online communities, that they have options and that they can, if they want, choose to interact in these 2 spaces, the Google Plus community and the Moodle. But obviously each educator, each participant will be encouraged to participate however they would like to. So they may choose personal blogs, websites, Nings, basically anything that's open, they are allowed to use. Okay, I'm going to conclude here. I still have a little bit more information here, but I really would like to field some questions. So I'm going to take a pause now, and because I know we have just a few more minutes left to field some questions and kind of leave the remaining slides for those who wish to take a look at it, and feel free to contact me outside of this conference if you want to know more about it. But I really would like to get some questions either through the chat, or if you have a mic and headset, perhaps if Nellie is in agreement, we could pass the mic to you as well. So Nellie, I don't know if anyone has their hand raised, if anyone would like to ask a question. James is asking, what are you finding is a motivating factor? Okay, James, I'm not sure if you can elaborate a bit more, if that's a question directed to me or someone in the chat from a prior comment. But if anyone has a question about what I've presented so far in my research, I know I'm kind of going quickly here for the sake of time, but I would like to encourage everyone to check out the website. If it's something that you find interesting and you want to participate, there's really no right or wrong way to participate. Feel free to do so. Again, the two websites, the Moodle and the Google Plus community, are open to the public, and so anyone can participate. And so feel free to do so if you would like to. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask those in the chat box. One of the ways that I'll be analyzing my research here is based on most significant change stories. So I'll be asking educators throughout the data collection period in what ways they felt that they changed, how their personal learning network changed. And that could be ideationally, it can be from a technological standpoint, or it could be from an interpersonal standpoint. So one of the things is looking at it from a historical standpoint and seeing how the changes occurred over time. I'm also be asking questions from a metacognitive, not only just a cognitive standpoint, but from a metacognitive. As I alluded to earlier, a lot of the questions that I'll be asking be for them to kind of step back and look holistically at their own learning and how their own personal learning network has helped them or has not helped them with their own professional development. And the idea here with reflexivity, this is again the way in which I'm going to be analyzing my information. We can look at it from basically from three different standpoints. When we're doing research, we look at the research and what the researcher knows. So I'm going to have some information that I know and the way in which I come to know something. The participants will know something, and I'll be looking at how they come to know and develop their own ideas. And ultimately, the audience, when I do my write-up, the audience will know certain things. So the idea here with my own particular research is that I'm trying to keep it as open as possible, as transparent as possible, so that what I know is what the participants know is what the audience knows. So the idea again is to try to keep that as open as possible. These results will be published. As it is being a dissertation, I'm looking into the possibility of publishing this under a Creative Commons license. I'm still trying to work out the details. When I get closer to the write-up, I'll have to work with my university and see what options I have. But I would very much like to publish this under a Creative Commons license so that my dissertation can be shared openly with the public. And so that's my goal, but I need to get a little bit closer to the actual write-up after I complete the study to find out all the details involved in trying to make that happen. Thanks, Helen, for that question. Okay, Nellie, I know we're getting close to wrapping it up here. I'd like to thank everyone. Again, thank you, Nellie, for having, sponsoring this conference. It's great. It's for me to be able to share this with you. It's always a learning experience for me to be able to kind of try to articulate what I've been doing, what I've been thinking about for a long time now. And it's been a great pleasure to be here. And I hope that everyone enjoys the rest of the conference. I know I will. And I think that'll be all for me. Thanks, Nellie. I'll turn it over to you, and we'll mute my mic.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Benjamin. That was awesome, and I'm really looking forward to your work. And I have some questions about, things like the IRB, the organizations that kind of stop us from being very creative with the doctoral dissertations and turning the whole process into something very, very institutionalized. There are certain rules and regulations with the IRB, and the protection of and the safety and so on of the participants. And if they're all online, Benjamin, I don't know how you're going to carry this, but you've got a lot of challenges, I know, and it's something that I'm looking forward to see how you overcome them, with the boards. The IRB are boards that kind of stifle our creativity when we're doing research. So Benjamin, thank you so much. And I'd like to encourage everybody to go on to the next session. It's going to be moderated by Nancy Zingrone, who's a close friend that I met like Benjamin, but I met her face-to-face, and I'm looking forward to meeting you, Benjamin, face-to-face. So enjoy the rest of the day, everyone, and thank you. Thank you so much. Bye for now.